Hi, my name is Megan Winter. I work here at Embrace, kind of who's hosting the webinar. I've been here for about 2 years. Previously, I worked at Datadog, so familiar with the monitoring space. And when I was introduced to what Embrace does, I think I saw this was kind of where the future was going, since more and more things are moving to mobile. Wanted to be part of a team who was kind of shifted towards that. But enough about me. We have Akrit here. He's previously from App Dynamics. He's way smarter than I am. So I'll pass it off to Akrit to kind of introduce himself and where he came from as well.
Well, thank you very much, Megan. And hi, everyone. Pleasure to be connected with everyone here, and a privilege to be a part of this session. As Megan mentioned, I was formerly at App Dynamics, where I was really passionate about all the advancements we were making in monitoring industries. And I actually, prior to that, I've spent over a decade in B2B SaaS technology companies. I was previously, even before that, at Salesforce. And so, at Salesforce, I focused a lot on performance engineering, performance monitoring, scalability engineering. And so that's really where I got a lot more practical insight around all the trends and advancements that were happening in the monitoring world. It was actually interesting that at Salesforce, we were evaluating APM vendors to bring in at the time. This was 2013, 2014. And through that process, I learned about a product like App Dynamics and was really fascinated by it because it was built for large enterprises and ended up joining them to run their core offering after meeting their team. This is exciting for me. I think Megan's being very modest. She probably knows a lot more than I do. I haven't been involved directly in the monitoring space for a couple of years. I actually started my own company after App Dynamics called AppDetch, which is a support automation platform. What we do is we look at support ticket data and analyze insights to help prevent customer escalations. And this was a challenge that I faced quite often in my previous roles and inspired me to build this company. But having said that, always very, very passionate about where the monitoring space is going, and excited to share more about my experiences there in the past, as well as what I see the future, where I see the future going in this space. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Akrit. And you're much smarter than I am. Colin, you can go to the next slide. So what is APM? I know most of the people on this webinar or might watch it later have a technical background. For people who don't know what APM kind of stands for, it's application performance monitoring. So monitoring all these complex applications, and it kind of started server side. So monitoring the server monolithic applications that run complex architectures, processes, and kind of monitoring that in real time. I want to ask Akrit, what do you work on at App Dynamics? I know you were kind of led the core product for the APM at App Dynamics, but what did that really entail for App Dynamics specifically on the APM side?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Megan. On the APM side, for App Dynamics, APM was the core business for them. This was the idea of APM stands for Application Performance Monitoring. The company was originally founded by Jyoti to build a product that could instrument server-side applications like Java applications, and APM continued to be kind of the core product for them. And so my expertise in that space was actually server monitoring, server-side monitoring. That's what I worked on at Salesforce. And so I was brought in and had the privilege to own the roadmap and product for their core APM business. And what was interesting was that during that time, we started to notice a trend. We saw applications moving from a monolithic stack to more microservice oriented applications. And so we were actually going through an interesting transformation of how we evolve our product to address the new layer of technology that was coming. And it's actually interesting to think about this. I tend to relate this to Italian food, and I think some people may have seen this sort of analogy, but if you think about where software architecture has evolved, and this applies directly into monitoring solutions, we used to have kind of pre-.com bubble era, we used to have spaghetti code. We had products that were very thin, solutions that were very thin, intertangled with one another, and you didn't really need that much complexity, but you had a lot of solutions that had a lot of dependencies and tangling. as the need for software started to increase, we started to organize ourselves as a software architecture to look at things that are more layered and separate applications in their app component and their database component. And so that essentially moved to kind of a lasagna stack, right? So you have like different layers and you have a large application. And so what we found was that that worked well earlier on in kind of the first decade, from 2000 2010, where we were looking to expand vertically and looking to kind of, if we drew more users and more usage that affected our monitoring capability, we would just we would grow vertically and increase the ability of our database and the performance throughput of our application layer. Now, what we started to see after that in the past decade, really between 2010 2020, is that that wasn't enough. We couldn't just keep scaling vertically, and you had to actually scale horizontally because we were seeing such a vast usage pattern of companies adopting digital products and digital transformation as a whole. And that to me, that started to move to what is commonly what was shared to be kind of a ravioli-based model, right? So you kind of move from this lasagna stack to ravioli, where you have microservices, and you move to services that are smaller, that allow companies to be more agile and scale more horizontally, where a microservice, instead of a large monolith monitoring application, becomes breaks down into microservices that have a single responsibility principle for monitoring, for serving a certain function of your application business. And so that was an interesting pattern that we saw. Now, when we talk about traditional APM is broadly still kind of the monolithic view. It's kind of the lasagna stack, or some cases spaghetti code. And so I think that is something that has fundamentally started to change, and it doesn't scale because we can't just keep adding more compute power vertically. We have to scale horizontally. It's also become apparent that every business wants to innovate quickly. That's how they deliver their business benefit faster to their customers. And the way to do that is to break your application and have a more distributed, agile workflow to deploy applications. And that's really shifted how monitoring works. And that was the big change that we saw on the server side at AppDynamics.
Wow, it's my lunch hour here in Chicago, so that got me a little hungry with the Italian reference. But kind of a great analogy there. Taking a step back from just APM as a whole, why is monitoring important in general? People have made complete businesses out of them, from AppDynamics, Datadog, New Relic, these huge IPO companies. Why do we care? Why should we care?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would actually add, not only has it become such big, the industry continues to grow through digital transformation. But monitoring at its core is really about making sure, the biggest negative consequence of not having good monitoring is an outage. Your application's down. And what that means is that your business users, your customers, cannot use your service, which is a direct impact to your relationship with them and to revenue for your business. And so monitoring is extremely important because it allows your team, from a development standpoint, to be proactive around understanding how the end user experiences. It really comes back to the customer and understanding the impact that a customer is experiencing from your application. We focus so much on features and functionality, that's what customers use. But at the end of the day, if the application doesn't perform, they're not able to use those features and functions, and lack of that use leads to a poor experience, which ultimately leads them to move to different products. So it does directly tie into churn and things like that. And so I think that the need for monitoring actually, it has always been important early on as software started to kind of grow as a trend, but it's becoming more and more important, primarily because applications are becoming far more distributed, dense, and we're still in this early era of digital transformation where software is still starting to evolve into a way where every channel of communication happens through software now, whether it's through your customers or internal communication. So monitoring is starting to become important because when you drive your business and you drive your professional life through software, and if that software is not monitored, then you have no predictability into an outage or an impact to that service.
And especially now, it's ever increasingly, because we're all working from home and we all have to rely on these software services kind of maintaining and increasing our business life here at home. So super important. I think that's a great transition into kind of users experience. You had mentioned features are great, new functionality is awesome, but if the core functionality doesn't work, of just the performance of the application working, the features don't matter. So Colin, if you can go to the next slide, I think it goes into mobile versus traditional. That's what Embrace is. That's why I'm here talking to Crete now, is kind of the difference between mobile and traditional APM. So at App Dynamics, I know you are building support for mobile. Can you kind of expand what you guys did over there and, again, touch on why the change was needed as far as from a product standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So App Dynamics was founded in, I believe, 2008. And so mobile was starting to kind of pick up there, but mobile monitoring and apps were not, and the web traffic was still much higher than mobile at that time. And so, we were designed really for, our core product was really for server monitoring and internal. But what we started to see as a trend was that more and more mobile usage was driving up. And so what that meant was for our customers, we were seeing mobile becoming a more common interface for our customers to interact with their customers. And so while we were enhancing value on the server side, the touch points for where customers are interacting with one of our customers' product was through mobile. And so what we started to look at there was, we wanted to be able to understand, if we're seeing latency and performance issues on the server side, who are the end users impacted? And we wanted to understand from an end-to-end perspective if there was certain impact to users on certain mobile devices or Android, iOS applications, and be able to connect that end user experience around performance monitoring back to the server, which is kind of still where the bulk of the application logic would live to service the end user experience. And that's how we thought about it, and we kind of built some of the mobile monitoring capability around and fitted that with the APM product that we had. We also started to see that, in this space, when you're seeing more distributed architectures from a server side take hold, so kind of going back to the Italian food example, moving from monolithic applications to these microservices, and what we realized was that that's great for agility. It allows engineers to develop faster, allows companies to be more agile and more modularized code, things like that. But what is the consequence of that for the customer? You can now imagine that you have all these distributed applications and they can change more rapidly. And those changes can now, any one of those changes could affect multiple users, and those users could be on mobile. So how do you stitch that back to understand, hey, this recent change that went out started to introduce a performance latency that impacted all these users on mobile devices, right? And I think being able to tie that together, that rapid ability for that change to happen is becoming more and more common because of the trends that we're seeing on the server side. So I think it all kind of connects back, and that's really how we thought about mobile, was end-to-end visibility, right from where the user interfaces with the product to the back end and the DB, and being able to kind of track a transaction and be able to better correlate it to the APM monitoring, which is kind of our core, where we had built a lot of insight.
Gotcha. And we think of it at Embrace very similar, right? At Embrace, for mobile APM, we're collecting everything from the device side, and we can correlate that to server connections. So we can connect or collect all these different network requests, and seeing if a failed network request kind of leads to a blank screen. That's kind of how we think of mobile APM, is connecting to the device rather than to the servers, but also showing that end-to-end connection from the device to the server and where things are failing. When I was at Datadog, people kept asking me, do they have mobile? And I said, not really. We just have a great APM product. But when I got introduced to Embrace, I was like, they're on to something. And so that's why we're leading kind of a mobile first, mobile only, because those little rapid changes, being an agile team, when you're making those changes, that dramatically can affect mobile. And in a real-time sense, it's kind of unpredictable. Once you release an app into the wild, a lot of different things can happen. So if you're not monitoring any of that, you're going to lose customers at the end of the day, right? Because that kind of correlates all the way back to the user experience, revenue status, kind of everything at the bottom line. So that's why we think of mobile completely separately than APM.
And I would also to echo your point, Megan, I think when I talked about the outage scenario, that is how I thought of our APM product at AppDynamics, is we will prevent outages. But from the mobile side, you have mobile crashes. And the visibility there is even harder to get predictability around, at least in the traditional monitoring way. And I think as more and more users are moving to consume products through mobile, it becomes even more important to be able to monitor crashes and user impact from any changes that happen on the back end. And so I think there is definitely a consequence of this agility that we're moving towards from a server perspective, and how that affects kind of the endpoint devices and how users are consuming the products with new changes that happen more rapidly. And so I would kind of put that analogous, the outage example on the server side to what is happening now on mobile is you may lead to more crashes from some of the changes, and you need to get ahead of it and not only understand when a crash happens, but could this affect other users in a certain way? Maybe there's a new product change, and when a user goes to a certain functional use case, a crash happens. And if you can catch it on the first one, then you can prevent it from affecting 100,000 other users that maybe haven't run into that yet, that would otherwise have a poor experience. I think that visibility is really, really important, and is something that is becoming more imperative as as we digitally transform, and as the product updates and changes become more continuous through this kind of underlying architectures on the server side that allow companies to scale faster and innovate faster.
Yeah, I think where technology is going, like as a whole, you look back at the history and it's always changing, it's rapidly changing. And right now, I think there's a huge push for observability and visibility. Those are kind of keywords kind of in this space right now. Just they want to know what's going on, because we have this idea of crashes in mobile. And to a user, if they can't click a button, if they can't access, their bank account and their banking app, they think it's a crash. But to a mobile developer or to a team, it could not be a crash. It could be a memory leak or CPU pegging or kind of something, server side that could affect things. So kind of visibility from end to end is really, really important to kind of figure out what that is. But also to your point, the user impact of it. Like, is this affecting one person, or is this affecting 5% of my user base, which could be a million people? So visibility to everything is so important for mobile teams all the way down to server side.
Yeah, and then the one quick thing I'll just to echo what you're sharing, Megan, is especially in the period that we're in right now with, unfortunately, the pandemic, we've had to isolate ourselves. And so, what would be an experience going to stores or going to a bank to do things? You're trying to move to do everything more online, and oftentimes the touch points for that online transactions are on mobile devices. And so the impact of a crash or a performance issue has a far greater consequence now than it did before. Just because people have no other way to do things that they have to get done. They rely on a mobile application to do that. So you can imagine, that one example is if I'm trying to access my bank account information, I'm trying to do some transfer, I'm doing it online or through an application, mobile application. If it's crashing on me, then that is very disruptive, and I can't go and solve it any other way because I'm not able to very easily get to a store. So I think that's kind of this period has sort of catalyzed the importance of having monitoring in place, so in-house teams have more proactive visibility to understand if the customers are getting affected by certain things, and also better have a way to then jump on that quickly and diagnose and be able to triage and troubleshoot the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Because not only like mobile applications are just getting so complex. You saw that with server side applications from monolithic to microservices. You're seeing it in mobile apps. Before you could only play little games. That's where our CEO came from, is the gaming industry. And then now you can do everything from find your new husband or wife on a dating app to, do all these different transactions and banking and investing and everything under the sun. There's literally an app for everything. And people, because of that, have higher expectations when it comes to the ability to access their apps that are on their phone. You think of when you download an app on your phone, that technology is now in your personal space. You have a direct connection to that technology and to that company. And so you're reliant on them to, deposit a check that you might need for your rent, to open your car door, to open your front door, to lock, the doors on your car, or check on your baby who's sleeping in the other room. So this technology is ever so important. And that's why I was really excited to do this webinar with you at Create, because monitoring is important. And there's a huge difference from traditional APM to mobile APM. So I'm super stoked to kind of share with share with the people listening to this webinar kind of the differences and why it's so important to have a distinction between mobile and traditional APM.
Yeah, definitely. Mobile is certainly the trend where things are moving because it's convenient. It's easier for people to access mobile than web, and and mobile devices are also becoming. I think we may talk about this a bit later, but mobile devices are becoming far more capable than they used to be in the past. And what that means is more can be handled from an application perspective on a mobile app on the device itself than having to send requests back to the server to do a lot of the analysis and logic. So as as mobile devices become more capable with more memory, more capacity, performance there becomes more important. It almost becomes kind of like your server in a way. And yeah, I think the mobile devices of today were kind of the laptops of 5, 6 years ago as far as capacity, compute, and things like that. So it is definitely a big trend in where things are heading, and it leads to the importance of mobile monitoring.
Yep. I think it kind of leads into the next slide, Colin. If you want to click through, we might have jumped ahead a little bit. We get so excited. Yep, we already covered that. If you hit the next one. Yeah, maybe one more. We didn't even need the PowerPoint, agree. We just powered through. Colin, can you hit one more? Okay. Kind of jumping ahead. So when people or kind of teams are evaluating APM, right? If their CEO is saying we need more monitoring, we need to figure out our solution to this, what should teams be looking for monitoring in general? Kind of different vendors who are out there, what should they be concerned about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the software ecosystem and monitoring ecosystem has become far more complex in a good way because it's allowed us to really understand monitoring at a more granular level, whether we're talking about a database, whether we're talking about a cache layer, an application, web client, or mobile. And so I think when you're looking at solutions for monitoring at a mobile level, for example, it's important that not only do you have good visibility around the performance metrics that a mobile monitoring application is delivering to you, right? At a high level, you can think of those metrics around throughput, what is kind of the average transaction volume coming through. You can think of it as far as latency. Is it giving me kind of the right predictability and visibility around application latency at a mobile level? But then really also being able to get more into diagnostics and understand, okay, if an issue happens and we get alerted on that proactively, so say an application crashes, and we can quickly see, okay, a user experienced a crash. We want to get ahead of this. It could be from a new update or rollout of a product change that could affect other users. How can we not only quickly understand that the crash happened, but understand why did this crash happen and be able to kind of drill a bit deeper and understand more information around diagnosing the problem and being able to reproduce it and quickly be able to remedy it. And I think that's just as important. And that comes when you have a product that's designed to be able to go that deep. At AppDynamics, on the core product on the APM side, this is where we were taking the product. We could do things like contention analysis. We could look at threads, and we could show you, for example, like business user transactions coming through. We call them business transactions. Maybe a user is trying to check out something from a cart. That's a user transaction. On the back end, we can instrument the servers. We can see what servers are serving that transaction. And if there's a latency that we start to observe for users completing that transaction, which is say cart checkout, which is in direct impact to customer's business line, we can quickly identify if there's a latency. Is that latency tied to contention, thread contention, for example, or and be able to show which thread is contending on what problem, and if there's other objects or threads that are blocking. We can get to the kind of like the code level and be able to show you at the function level what the problem is. Similarly, if it was a Java application, we could show you garbage collection metrics, things like that, to help you understand, what can you do to optimize your application that helps drive latency. So I think being able to go deeper and understand, on the mobile front, crashes and what's kind of leading to crash issues and diagnostics, and be able to get diagnostics around that and be rich around that is really key to being able to not just get that visibility, but triage and solve the problem more effectively, and then kind of drive that agility with your engineering team to solve issues faster.
So what I'm hearing is when people are looking for a vendor out there to monitor, you're looking for more depth versus kind of breadth of monitoring. So something that gives you rich data, kind of more data that you may need in order to solve any kind of issue that arises.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been so deep in the performance industry. I enjoy just going deeper and trying to understand, what's the root of a problem, and really getting to root cause. And it's exciting, kind of that discovery aspect. And I think products that allow you to go deeper and really understand kind of the underlying why behind a certain crash or user experience issue, and getting to even like a certain code area or method function. Um, I think that is extremely valuable, because that is now direct visibility to you and what you need to change and fix to be able to triage the problem faster. It's not only important just to get visibility. I think that's definitely the first layer, but not only being able to see it quickly, but understand why this happened and being able to remedy that problem quickly, and then introduce a change that make sure other users don't experience it. That's equally important. And so I think as you think about vendor products, what I thought a lot about, for example, and I'll go back to my time at Salesforce where we were looking at APM vendors. What excited me about AppDynamics was Salesforce is such a large company. At that, it's way larger now, but back then it was still very large. We were looking to grow 5x in a couple of years ahead. And so at that scale, we wanted something that was really able to go deeper and understand, what we were running in Java, and wanted to go deeper and understand, at an application level, where were we seeing contention and where were we seeing latency, so that we could take that feedback right to the developers and help them understand what they can fix that caused regression in the application experience. And so I think being able to go deep is extremely important around that, and that I think is a big part of um, the vendor purchase process decision in this space.
Mm-hmm. And I think since teams care about, different things, each as technology is more diverse, so are teams and what they care about. Like if you go on the App Store or Google Play Store, you're going to see a ton of different applications. And at the core, they care about performance, but they have a ton of different, KPIs that they care about. One team might care about A versus another company cares about B. So where we're moving from a mobile APM perspective here at Embrace is giving kind of the power back to the teams on what they care about. We can collect a lot of things from the device side, connect that to the server side, but giving the power back to the teams for video and photo apps. Maybe they care about, photo uploads who have heavy processing times. For e-commerce companies, they might care about, those failed purchases that might be due to failed network requests. So giving them the power to analyze, go deep into what they monitor and how they monitor, I think is kind of leading the next kind of version of mobile APM. But this question that you see on the screen now, I think it's one of my favorites when Akrit and I were kind of talking about what to kind of share with the audience today. He brought this up, like mobile is now. Everybody has a device in their phone. Everybody, uses mobile apps all the time. But what's next? Like, what is the next type of technology that we will need to monitor? My idea is like something health related. I'm a yoga instructor and I care a lot about like fitness and health. So something that's integrated into the health of our body and monitoring that. But I'd love to hear from what are your thoughts and kind of having this as a kind of a closing statement here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the things that I think about as, the future, where we're going in the future with digital transformation and how far we've come so quickly, I think we're going to continue to see a large proliferation of endpoint devices and devices that can kind of almost start to, I don't want to overuse the word monitor, but more devices, connected devices in homes and other areas that allow us to have more needs surfaced through software and through automation. And as we have more of these devices and capability, IoT devices, for example, they're going to become more complex and more capable to do a lot more things to run our life. And as they do that, they're going to need better monitoring, because we also become more dependent on these services. As we become more dependent on these services, the cost of an outage or a crash or issue on the service has a bigger impact on our life and our day-to-day things. So there is a negative consequence of becoming dependent on this without proper monitoring. You're kind of flying blind, and you don't know if there's going to be an impact that can now change how you are living your life, right? Especially for devices that are kind of endpoint devices at homes. Kind of speaking more about mobile, I think the future of mobile is also that it's continuously expanding. I think there's continued investments in the community around enhancing the capability of mobile devices. We see that with iPhones and Android phones updates all the time, and every year there's something better, like a little better phone, something that's a lot more capable, and was kind of like as powerful as a laptop a few years ago. And so as these devices become far more capable, what's going to happen is I think there'll be a lot more personalization of user experiences because you'll be able to serve more on the end user side, just like we've done on the web, right? And so I think you can build a lot more in your app to personalize user experience, build more, build a better user experience end to end, and serve more things from a mobile application because it's able to do more because it's more capable. It's a bigger machine now. And I think as a consequence of that, it kind of goes back to what I was sharing earlier, which is that monitoring becomes even more imperative. Right? Because if you don't have monitoring, you don't have that proactive visibility. It's kind of like flying blind. You know, you're flying in the clouds and you don't have visibility, and you don't know if you're going to hit something, right? If you're in a plane, so it's really important that you can see what's going on. And this is more kind of for the companies that are using these monitoring tools to instrument. You can see what's your customer's experience like, and how can you continue to keep that continue to keep their experience at a high, very positive, and keep your SLAs high, and make sure that you're not violating any of your SLA agreements, and making sure that there's no outages and crashes and things like that.
Yeah, so monitoring, we didn't even touch on alerting, but that kind of ties into, you know, you can see a great landscape of what's going on, but actually getting alerted in real time, because that correlates directly. If someone can't make a purchase within an app, then the bottom line gets affected, and that's what shareholders care about. That's what the owners care about. So alerting kind of goes hand in hand with monitoring, I think. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to add, you're absolutely right. And I think the thing that I really like about alerting is the concept of alerting is really not just being proactive, but actually being able to tell you who to wake up. Like when there's a problem that happens, as your teams become more distributed, and you know, you can imagine even on the mobile front, the applications are becoming more complex. It's not just one developer that owns it. There's different people that contribute to the innovation that happens there. And when certain problems occur, it's, you know, alerting everybody about everything is not a good thing because it causes panic and kind of escalates things, and you kind of lose, you end up becoming more disruptive in solving something quickly. And so I think there's an area of innovation with monitoring and alerting on top of monitoring, where you're actually able to better detect, you know, who is the person that is responsible for, or is the kind of the domain expert for a certain type of issue, and making sure that they're the ones that are kind of it's almost like enhancing that routing process of making sure that the right person is getting to the issue most quickly, so that they're able to, so you're able to improve the mean time to resolution of solving a particular problem.
Yep, and that's what we were built for, is exactly that, solving issues faster, and then giving teams kind of the context in order to solve. You know, it's great to be alerted on issues, but if you don't have the data there, the depth of the data, then you're kind of SOL, right? You can't solve the issue. So that's kind of,
yeah. And you don't know who to reach out to, because that depth will give you more clarity around, hey, this looks like something I don't know, but I know someone who kind of works on this because I can see a lot more information around this problem.
Right. And exactly, don't cause panic amongst the teams. Keep people at ease. There's already enough chaos kind of going on in the world currently. We don't need any more. So get better monitoring, people. That's kind of, I think, our Crete and ours message today is mobile monitoring is important. APM is important. I think this was awesome, Colin. I'd love to open it up to kind of the audience today if there's any questions that have come in, or people's comments on, you know, what's next after this, if people have thoughts on that as well.
One quick thing I'll mention, if you're thinking about what next, you know, I've been curious about, you know, we talked about Italian food, and I love that analogy. You know, what's next? Is it like, are we moving to like macaroni or something? What's coming after microservices? It's kind of interesting to think about that. There's a lot of thoughts around that, but what's kind of the next wave of the architectural changes? We definitely see a lot more streaming data, pipeline-based architecture on the server side, and how that starts to impact, you know, mobile applications more real time.
Yeah, I hope it's tacos because I love those. Colin, if there's any questions, Would you
Yeah,
like to
so
go
I'll
ahead?
leave it open for a few more seconds if people have any questions that they would like to ask. In the meantime, I'll do the wrapping up housekeeping. I want to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. We will announce the winner of the drone via email after this webinar is complete. Also, we will be emailing out a recording of the webinar so you can share it with your teams later today. So I'm just going to leave a couple more seconds in case we have any last minute questions, or if there's anything that Megan or Crete that wasn't brought up that you can think of.
The only thing I would add as kind of final thoughts is I think the monitoring industry, the space as a whole is becoming even more and more important. And that's exciting to me at a passionate level because this is not only something I worked in as a practitioner, in the engineering team, as someone that was responsible for monitoring products, but also specialized with all the way back in computer science school. And I think as we evolve as a technology business, monitoring becomes even more imperative. It's running more of our lives. So it's kind of like, if you're, as software proliferates even more, which we're just in the early innings of in the century, monitoring becomes kind of like almost the urgent need for making sure that your software works when it's supposed to.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing all of your wonderful thoughts, Akreet. It's really been a pleasure kind of having you on the webinar, but also working with you before to kind of gear this up. I've learned definitely a lot from your experience from AppDynamics to Salesforce to your CEO experience now at AppEdge. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you to everyone that was part of the webinar and for listening in.